Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of The Path Less Chosen, the podcast showing the careers they don't teach you about in school. My name's Sol.
I'm Jamie.
And this week we have James on, and James works as a global operations and plans manager for a company called IDG Security. Well, that might sound quite confusing and probably a little boring, but actually it is far from that. Jamie, what can we expect from this week's episode?
Yeah, no, fascinating. We're going to find out exactly what it involves to be a global operations and plans manager, but in countries such as Somalia, Myanmar, Afghanistan, and Iraq. We're also going to find out how watching Black Hawk Down helped him to prepare for one of his work projects. And finally, we're going to hear about how he learned what to do in a mortar strike.
Very well summed up, Jamie. Absolutely buzzing to get into this one, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think. But just before we get into the episode, if we could just ask you to give us a follow on our social media. We're trying to push out as many interesting reels, as much interesting content, and it just is a good way to keep up to date with the podcast. Hopefully we won't be cluttering your news feed, and you get to keep up to date with all the new podcasts and great guests that we're working very hard behind the scenes to get on for you. Thank you very much for your support, and without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you, James, for joining us. We're really interested to get into your career pathway, because I think having done this now for over 30 episodes, we definitely are yet to meet anyone within this podcast or beyond that has stood in Somalia with gunshots whizzing over their head. So firstly, we want to ask you, why did you choose a career path that put you in that position?
I mean, probably didn't really expect it to go this deep, but I was really interested in, since I was young, since a young age, in like geography and things like that, anything from maps to sort of learning about capital cities and things like that. So I was a bit of a weirdo in that front, but sort of what started at the end of school and towards university, I started to get more interested in politics, more broadly sort of international politics, relations, geopolitics and things like that. I was never a massive book reader, but I would be really keen on reading sort of articles on sort of current affairs and what's going on in the world currently. I sort of started thinking about careers, and I was thinking to myself, what do I want to do? I kind of want to marry a bit of my ambition with my passions, and sort of my passions are slightly outweighing the ambition probably side of things. I started looking into political risk consultancy. That was sort of when I found out about that, I was thinking, this is sort of exactly what I wanted to do. As a lot of people find out pretty early on, unless you're lucky, it's obviously quite difficult to get a job straight off the bat. And I was putting out a few applications to various places, and they just wouldn't come back to me. And obviously I didn't really have the experience and things like that. And I went traveling. Fortunately, and I'm never afraid to admit this, but my dad, who was obviously a Gurkha, basically put me in touch with someone that he knows who is a non-executive director of the company. He then put me in touch with the chairman of the company, who was very kind, offered me an interview, 2 hours, very long chat, very nice guy, and we kind of went into there. I mean, I didn't think I was initially envisioning going into something like IDG, which is my company, a security company, physical security company. I thought I was going to go into something more desk jobby, if you like, something more political risk, analysing various scenarios, which is something that I've basically been doing since I was like reading articles and things like that. So the prospect of then eventually, I remember it quite well. I met my CEO, another lovely guy, and he said to me when I first met him, we might get you out to Baghdad soon. I was just thinking, right, I don't know about this one. And so I said to my parents, is this right? Is this the good idea or the right idea? Because I actually, funnily enough, I had actually 2 opportunities for a job at the exact same time. So after sort of a year and a half of searching for a job, 2 suddenly pop out of nowhere at the exact same time. One was for an HR job in basically an energy company, an Italian energy company. I should mention I'm half Italian, which is why I was going down a little bit of that route. I chose IDG to my parents' dismay. And that's where I find myself now. I actually did a year a month ago in September.
If I heard that right, you basically got told that we might get you out to Baghdad for one job, and then the other job was kind of HR based, and you went for the Baghdad job. Let's really dig into that thought process, because I think my mum would have banned me from that decision. I'd be in HR right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm an only child, so it's sort of, I don't know. It's like doubly strong, that sense of you're not doing what you want to do. I mean, between the two options, for me, it was a bit of unknown going into IDG, which is where I'm currently at. The other one was a bit more clear cut. I knew exactly what I was going to be doing. I knew my place, obviously within the company, but also my place working on what I'd be asked to be doing and things like that. Whereas IDG, I wasn't quite sure. You know, I thought the idea of going to Baghdad was sort of almost like a joke or sort of something. But I obviously, in the back of my mind, I thought, you know, what if this is a possibility? You know, I was thinking, this is like perfect, because I'm also a huge fan of traveling. Younger, my biggest dream was to travel to all the countries in the world, and what better, you know, thing to do at a company like IDG. The kind of reality kind of hits you though when your flights have been booked and you get your email and you're thinking, yeah, what you can't really explain it in a way. It's just crazy. One was sort of just 2 months after I joined. I went to just over a week, and yeah, I mean, the thought process there was 3 months ago before I started, and then sort of when I'm there, I'm sort of thinking, what am I doing? In a way, and yeah, it was a pretty eye-opening experience rather than anything else. I remember it was obviously it wasn't a direct flight. I had to stop over in Addis Ababa for a few hours, and there I actually met a colleague of mine who works in South Africa, and so we met halfway in a way, and we got the plane to Somalia together, and you're sort of looking in the queue to show your boarding pass just before getting on the plane, and you're sort of you're singled out massively, because not many, you know, people looking like us go to Mogadishu every day and things like that. So, but, you know, you're in that position. You kind of need to. I was trying to think this to myself, even though I was slightly scared. You know, you got to toughen up a little bit here. This is happening. You can't just, you know, ask the pilot to turn around, kind of thing. So in Mogadishu, we have this. It's essentially a compound. Call it a compound, and basically just a bit of an explanation about what we do. We hire guards, and this is the connection that I was trying to make earlier with my dad. My chairman, as well as my dad, was an ex-Gurkha, and we essentially hire ex-Gurkhas from both the British and the Indian militaries. And so basically it's our predominantly Gurkha guards is who we basically hire. These are originally from Nepal, so they're Nepalese soldiers, and they are regarded as one of, if not the toughest. I mean, it's the epitome of a good soldier. And everyone says we're lucky to have them on our side. But essentially, yeah, they're Nepalese originally, and whilst the British basically took the Gurkhas in as part of the military. On the history on that, because I've got no idea, but I think, yeah, anyway, I'm not gonna embarrass myself. But some time ago, and the British understood that these guys are, you know, those jokes about, you know, how my parents went to school when I was younger, kind of thing. These guys actually trekked mountains to go to school, kind of thing. And they're on average they're very small people, but these guys are the fittest people you'll know. For Sherpas, obviously famous for a reason like that. Essentially, those are the Gurkhas. There used to be, I believe, 6 regiments in the Gurkhas. Now it's been condensed into 2 main regiments in the British military. So you got the 1st Gurkha and the 2nd Gurkha Rifles. So those are the 2 regiments. And then now you also have an Indian contingent of Gurkhas in their military as well. So that's a backstory to the Gurkhas, essentially.
Yeah, that's just mental. So it'd be interesting to know, like, what exactly Obviously, you had the background with your dad being a Sherpa himself. What is it like to actually work with these guys? And I think you were beginning to touch on it anyway. What is your role with them? What are you guys doing directly with the Gurkhas, and what role do you play in that as? And we know your job title is Global Ops and Plans Manager, right? Talk us through a little bit to give us context. What actually are you doing?
What I'm there to do, got different operations in different countries. So we've got operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Myanmar, and sort of smaller scale projects going on elsewhere. But essentially, we're planning on expanding anyway. But what we're doing there is actually we're providing security to critical missions, and those missions typically are embassies. They are state missions. Then you've got the United Nations. You've got NGOs, international NGOs, humanitarian organizations, and in order for these guys to fulfill their duties and to basically live there, they need to have an element of security. In fact, depending on where you are, for instance, Afghanistan or Somalia, you need a security force, not just force, but you need mitigation plans, you need security risk assessments, you need all of these things in order to essentially have, whether they're locals or whether they're Westerners or whomever, these guys need to have security because they are directly a threat to whomever want to essentially destroy the organization, kill individuals because they stand for Western democracy or whatever, different views to their own. Essentially, I put it diplomatically like that. But what I do is I'm the great part about what I do, and I sort of realized that not halfway, but slightly after I joined, I realized this is great because I, as a global operations and planning manager, I'm essentially I help with the different operations in all the different countries. So I speak with all the country offices, whatever they need help with. To assist them, and obviously the actual manager of my position, he with him as well to get various things done. I mean, to put into context, again, I get a huge variety of different tasks. I could be working on audit, which security company is really important because you need to be sort of 100% secure, but people need to make sure that there are no gaps in your organization, there are no gaps in your finances. Within this industry, sometimes things crop up and they're a bit dodgy sometimes and things like that. So we have to maintain complete sort of credibility on that front. Can be working on trying to get new contracts, speaking to new clients, prospective clients. Well, not actually things that I did, which I do now is and it really interests me, is sort of country sort of entry analyses. So we find a prospective client which is based maybe, let's say, Haiti as an example. I would then be tasked as someone who would not go out there, but sort of go on the internet and basically research. And I've created documents kind of called sort of entry analyses about these countries and analysing their political environment, their security environment, economic environment, and all these things. Actually, if I was to, long story short, I'm basically a assistant for all the countries, assistant for the centre core of the actual company itself. I mean, it's difficult to explain in few words, but yeah, I do quite a few things, and I love it for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine it's fascinating. I mean, listening to you talk there, it sounds like a job that there's a bit of middle manning, there's a lot of like personability, you're doing a lot of networking, and you're also doing like the research side in the background. But the real fascinating, like interesting element about what you're doing as a career is that you're doing that on behalf of, as well as visiting some of the most dangerous places in the world, right? So what are the kind of bits that you've not touched upon there that perhaps like separate it, that make it, this is actually a job that's a little bit scary at times, and perhaps does it take a certain kind of person to actually want to go into this line of work given the kind of places you're working?
I would say, I mean, I probably expected it to not, I mean, it never turned out to be, obviously, for good reason, but I thought, a bit like a James Bond role in a way. You're going out to these places and you're undercover. It's nothing like that. If anything, you're just going. I know I'm just saying just because if I said that to me over a year ago, I would have said you're crazy. But it is, you're going to countries which are obviously dangerous, but you know, you just gotta, if you have your wits about you, then you'll be fine. I think certainly, I don't think you have to be a certain type of individual to do it. That's certainly not to big me up whatsoever, but I think you do go into that environment and you're thinking anything can go wrong at any time. It happened with the, I mean it was probably expected, but for instance in 2021 when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, IDG, the company that I work for, was the only security company that stayed during that process. And you know, for whatever reason, I joined the company back then, and I had gone to Afghanistan for the first time then. You're kind of thinking, well, what happens if, you know, it hits the fan? Because there's typically no way out of the country, especially, I mean, it depends on the scale of it. But for instance, in Somalia, not too long ago, huge threat from Al-Shabaab, which is the Al-Qaeda linked terrorist group there, which is a large force in the country, and they're known for chucking mortars over to the western areas of the city, shots and whatever. And I think it was sort of maybe half a year ago, 6 months ago, they basically would. There was a intelligence suggesting that they were going to basically chuck a whole lot of mortars over into sort of, if you like, the green zone. It's not actually called the green zone, but I think it's called the Mogadishu International Airport Zone, which is essentially everything around the airport. It's quite a thin piece of land, but it's where all the UN are, it's where the embassies are, and it's basically anything Western's there. And basically they just chucked a barrage of sort of missiles and things like that, attacks. We'll, not in our company, but in the industry you call them BBIEDs, so body-borne IEDs. It's another way of sugarcoating suicide bombings, essentially. Yeah, it's thinking to yourself, this could happen at any moment. It's one of those things where you kind of get, you can't really get prepared for it unless you're really fully experiencing it. But I mean, again, I did some courses before out to Somalia, I believe I did. Afghanistan. I did a HEAT course, which is a hostile environment awareness training course, and I met a few other people who were doing the same. Well, not same job, same industry. They were journalists. In fact, the predominant were journalists, and these guys are going out to Afghanistan, Somalia, all these places, and you're sort of learning. It's a 5-day course, and you're learning how do I do if there's a mortar strike. Do if there's an assailant running towards me with a knife and things like that. Where of course that helps you. I mean, a lot of it stuck with me. I mean, you think about certain things, it's hard not to think about. And you're obviously, you know, you're doing first aid training as well, and you're looking at basically, if in these kind of environments you're not going to get sort of a paper cut, you're going to get sort of, I don't want to sound too crass, but you know, body parts going flying kind of thing. So you're learning about that kind of stuff, and you I was thinking midway through that course, I was thinking, you know, what am I doing? But it's a heck of a, it's almost a heck of a thrill when you're there. In fact, to be honest, again, I probably, it sounds anticlimactic, but it's, you know, when you're there, it's just business as usual.
So interesting. And it's like, I'm sure you've been told this 1,000 times with the film Argo, but I always remember watching that film Argo and thinking it's mental when kind of civilians and Western civilians get caught up in something like that. Is there like any times where you've kind of thought, like, imagine that worst possible scenario and been like, this just isn't worth it? Like you said on the course, are there any other times where you've been like, this is too much stress, or has it always been smooth sailing?
I mean, Argo is a great film. It's actually one of my favourite films. Talking about films, I watched Black Hawk Down before going to Somalia, which was a proper sort of scene setter, if you like. But in Afghanistan, I didn't really have any sort of amazing experiences, which is ironic in a way, because you think of Afghanistan, you automatically think something's going to go wrong. And I was there for just under a month, from probably the small road traffic collision that I had as soon as I landed there, but it wasn't big. It's just a wind mirror got clipped in the middle of a junction or something. But sort of, kind of, was a fun one on that one, because since I heard mortar strikes going off, only noise of it, I looked at my colleagues. We were actually out for dinner, and when I say out for dinner, there's within the area, the green zone, you got a little restaurant. It's actually very nice, very modern, and they build it because people live here essentially, and they could be from Italy, from the UK, whatever, and they live here. They live there. Make it quite nice and as cozy as possible in such an environment. But I looked at my colleagues to the left of me and I said, "What was that noise?" And they sort of looked at me really nonchalantly and just said, "Oh yeah, it's mortar. We get it all the time." And that was Al Shabaab, the terrorist group, basically chucking a couple over the fence. When I probably a couple days into Mogadishu, I sort of our space there where we live and we work, noise system, and it basically announces incoming. I was probably 12:30, just about to have lunch, but I was outside having a coffee, and all of a sudden I'm sat on my own and I hear this bellow out, incoming, this tannoy. Yeah, it can't be right. I mean, I'm hearing things, but it went on, and I thought, I was showed, where you go if there's a mortar strike, where you go to hide, and we have an area bunker, essentially where there's supplies in the bunker in case things go really really wrong, really badly. And thinking about it now, but I don't want to sort of, if you like, look like an idiot, because I thought no one else was moving. There was a couple people in the distance that I could see, but no one was moving. But I was sort of walking at a faster pace than usual towards the bunker because I don't want to take any risks. But equally, I don't want to look like an idiot in case this was a whatever. It wasn't a mortar strike. Anyway, I was in there for sort of 10 minutes. I was thinking, bloody hell, this is two days in to Somalia, and I'm experiencing this. And I had the courage to walk outside, and I basically knocked on my door in his office, and I said, "Did you hear that?" And he just said, "Oh no, it's just a classic Wednesday test fire drill." So one of those things at school, when you get annoyed that you forget you got a fire drill and you have to walk out. Well, tell you what, how much I wish I'd rather be at school experiencing that. But it was, yeah. I mean, I know it probably sounds a bit anticlimactic, but the whole thing, the whole sort of atmospherics and the atmosphere that you get when you walk out the plane, just I know obviously you're going there, but it just feels hostile, and that's the main thing you can hear. I mean, I heard in Mogadishu especially, I heard gunshots being fired in place every day. It could be warning shots, it could be guards, not our guards, but it could be you got a big peacekeeping force in Mogadishu from the African Union. And when they feel uncomfortable, someone's approaching them and they're not replying or responding to their saying, get back, they'll fire warning shots either into the ground, or hopefully in the ground, because you're not allowed to do it in the air because it's going to have to come down somewhere. It's just you're thinking this is hostile. You don't. No, it's not a nice feeling, that's for sure.
And then just on that, I think do speak about it with a little bit of a nonchalance, but given the fact that 99% of our mates are working in the same kind of desk jobs in London, the life you're living is obviously so crazily different to that, right? I'd be interested to know, firstly, a short answer could be, do you ever have times where you think, I don't want to do all of this travelling, I'd actually rather be in a normal job 9 to 5 back in England? And then the second part of my question is, for anyone else listening to you that thinks, I would love to do a job like this, where I'd love to go to these kind of places and get immersed into that atmosphere and that environment and see what I could do as a career there, what would your advice be to them?
To tackle the first point, I will probably have the urge to need to travel with my work for quite a while, I think. I reckon for, I'm 23, at least maybe, could be 6, 7 years, 8 years, it depends. I mean, again, career paths change all of a sudden. You get things can change very quickly. You can have something that pops up and it's not something you'd expect to be doing in 3 months, but so I think you got to be open to not last minute changes, but sort of things can change a little bit quickly in some circumstances. In terms of working in what I'm doing, you've got to have the passion for it, and I love this job. I think that's a real aspect, is loving what you're doing, and this is obviously a different job to any other job for that matter. I think your interests as well have to not be different, but sort of I think if you're passionate about things like international relations, international politics, security, geopolitics, whatever that might be, you might think that this job is perfect. In a lot of cases, I've thought, actually, much variety even within my sector, that actually even different routes are equally as interested, if you are interested in say what I'm interested in. Are aspects of, I know people give insurance pretty bad rep in terms of enjoyability, or enjoyment. Actually, there's certain parts of insurance that are, maritime security and things like that, and that's really, really interesting, because you're actually interacting with a lot of players that I kind of interact with as well. In short, I reckon go for the niche parts of picture, if you like. I mean, political risk consultancy is really, actually, unbeknownst to me when I was starting to learn about this industry, is actually a huge industry. There are different ways of getting in, and quite frankly, for instance, within my company, you don't have to be ex-military, and I'm not ex-military. In fact, I don't think I would, despite my father and my uncle being ex-Gurkhas and being surrounded by sort of military personnel my whole life, is, you think, do I have to be military? No, you don't. You don't at all. I mean, within my company, people within HR travel to Afghanistan. Within operations, logistics, all of these things, you still get that exposure. It's difficult for me to say, really, in short, how to get into this, because I have to admit as well that I stumbled across it quite fortunately in my case. But I think, if you like something enough, and you like, for instance, what I'm discussing about, or the interests that I shared, and sort of, go for it. Try, do a lot of research within the sector, not necessarily about the sector. Well, it works in tandem, I suppose, but essentially, just if you're passionate enough, you'll get there. Essentially, you just have to find the little niches within the sector, and that's something that I didn't find out until I properly sort of researched enough about it.
Okay, amazing. And if someone did, if someone was talking, looking into the sector, would it be a case of looking on LinkedIn? Would it be a case of emailing companies? Just keen to get some practical tips.
Yeah. I think, LinkedIn's always a strong place to start. That you have. My company is relatively small, so you don't really have as much of a marketing team as you would in bigger companies. I mean, off the top of my head, there's a company called Control Risks, which is, a huge company in political risk consultancy and security and things like that. And they for sure will have a marketing team. And after, I remember writing things down on LinkedIn, and I was expecting I didn't get any reply, and I was thinking, no one looks at the LinkedIn, no one, but they do, they really do. And it's actually, they don't reply to everyone, because for the bigger companies you get just a barrage of people just writing. But you got to set yourself out in a way, right? You got to interests, which is the difficult part. A lot of it is also, relations as well, not necessarily through who I know or whatever. It's more, you got to go to open days and things like that. You got to go to the International Security Expo, which was in London last year, which is where I went to with the company. But if I had found out about it, that's a really good place to start. You meet people, because it's you won't find a company like Control Risks or my company really advertising on billboards outside and on this tube, because whilst we're not, CIA or whatever, we're equally quite, we recognise that we work in an industry that sometimes maybe marketing isn't the best solution for it. So when I say, LinkedIn's a very good place to start, because you put yourself out there on an individual scale, but you go to open days, expos, you go to things like Chatham House, which is a really good think tank. You got to become a member there, or I'm not really sure exactly how it works there, but get yourself involved with these think tanks, and by then you'd meet loads of people, and you'd have your own contact list and that's actually really important, because not only will you find out more about the situation, but you also find out more about whether you like it or not, whether there are different routes that you still haven't discovered yet, which in my case I've discovered a huge amount of avenues within the sector. So yeah, I think trying to put yourself out there, meeting people in person is a hugely impactful thing to do.
Amazing, so useful, and I think amazing way to wrap up that. I'm sure someone's listening here and thinking this is something that excites me. So hopefully some really useful tips right at the end. So thanks very much for that. And to come to the last question, which we ask all our guests, we'd love to just take you back to a time, perhaps when you were considering your career, perhaps when you were tossing up that HR job over this, and tell us one thing that you do. Tell us one thing that you do the same. Tell us one thing you do differently, and tell us one thing that you tell yourself to motivate yourself.
Well, the first one, what I do the same is sort of what I covered a little bit earlier. Like something enough, you should try your best to really learn more about what you want to do. Right, that's the most important thing. If you have a passion, chances are you're also good at it. Because you go to a job and you think, I love doing what I'm doing, I'll naturally be quite good at it. There's some exceptions, but equally, passions are passions, and if you're doing something that you're passionate about, you want to do well in it, but you also, you might actually naturally be good at it. What I probably would have gone back and changed, I think it's a tricky one, because I was so keen on doing what I wanted to do that I would inadvertently shut doors. And I found out that there was this huge industry awaiting for me and I was shutting doors off at a bad time really in my career, because not the same in Europe, but in this country we're fortunate to live in a place where you can go from doing something, a history of art degree, and then all of a sudden you're working in, give some silly examples, but you could be working what I'm doing. If you have the passion for it, it's possible. What I did was put all my eggs in one basket in a way, and I didn't give enough opportunity, or didn't give enough thought to other things that might not have interested me as much, but it probably would have helped me progress. In understanding career paths and things like that. So I think having an open mind to what you could be doing, and I know sometimes you might be choosing something that you don't necessarily want to be doing. I think that's important. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's probably what I'd say. And then I think it's a mixture of ambition and passions, right? I think for me, my passion was, I should be conflicts and learning about security and things like that is a huge help, right? I think if you're passionate and you mix that with ambition, which you naturally would be ambitious if you're passionate about something, it's a huge aspect for that. So I'm not giving the best answer in the world. Perhaps some of your other guests have produced much better and much more educated answers. But in essence, if you're passionate about something, you're so likely to reach that end goal. You just have to basically research enough about it for you to then give yourself the best opportunity in a way.
Yeah. No, I love that, to be honest, mate. It's a kind of message that people listening will want to hear, because a lot of them will be thinking that they've got their own interests. It might not be conflicts, right? That's a niche one, but whatever their niche might be, it just gives them that kind of message that actually if they just go for it enough and want to pursue that, then that's how they can maybe end up in a position doing what you're doing. So thank you so much for obviously sharing all of that. I think fascinating to listen to the way that you do speak with it with such nonchalance, and it's kind of just another day at the office, right? But it could not be further from a day at the office. It's just incredible to hear the kind of lifestyle you're living And I'm so glad you're able to share that with us. I think it's such an important message for people out there that even if they're looking to do something similar to you, it might not work out the same way as you. And I'm glad that you kind of shared that message at the end there about being open-minded. So I'm very glad you didn't end up in a HR role. I think your talent and mindset would have been wasted in that office job. And I'm so glad you're traveling the world doing something very, very cool. So thanks for coming on and thanks for sharing it.
With me, guys. It's great to speak about this stuff. So yeah, it's a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Okay, really interesting. I had no idea what to expect from that, but for sure he's spent some time in some cool places, and it's definitely a job that didn't even know existed. So exactly what we want on the podcast. But I will pass over to you for the first takeaway.
Yeah, I think my first initial takeaway was that we have a lot of people that kind of explore the idea that maybe as their career path, they could just travel. You know, it's kind of seen as this idyllic little dream that people can travel the world as part of their job. And actually, this was something that he's doing, but probably not in the way that everyone initially thinks. You know, people think you're going to go to Bali, to Australia, to wherever, all these glamorous places. No one ever mentions Somalia, Myanmar, and Iraq and Afghanistan in those sentences,
It'd be a weird
right?
gap here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's satisfying that urge to travel, which he kind of touched upon. You know, he's always wanted to do that, but he's doing it in a real unique way, and he's made it into a career path that's taking him to some places in the world that 99% of people that are listening to this will probably never go to.
100%, gives you some unbelievable stories, and as long as you're staying safe, then I think it's what cool places to visit. And definitely, as you say, off the beaten track. I won't take any personal insults about the name of my gap year, but for sure. And I think it's really nicely comes on to what I was talking about, what I think I took away from that episode, which is there's actually with careers, I think you can really work out what you're interested in and find a career that exists. And for him, he knew he was aware, he knew he liked international relations. There's actually quite a cool way that he's just linked up a pure interest into a career. And I think a lot of people think they can have these interests where they're I don't know, I'm interested in the history of art, or I'm interested in a rogue bit of science. And there's actually careers in almost everything. So actually searching out some of those niche careers and going for them and putting effort into searching for them could actually mean that you end up in a job where you spend day upon day doing things that you genuinely love. And I quite like that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think something that this is my third and final point, something that we get from a lot of people that are working in kind of 9 to 5 office jobs and the normal paths that we talk about. A lot of them say that they go to work every day. It's kind of the same mundane tasks all along the same lines. It's a bit repetitive. They're doing the same kind of things each day. And actually, what I took away from him, which was really interesting and good career advice overall, is actually if you're just open-minded to taking on some unpredictability and not really knowing what's going to happen every day when you wake up at work, where you're going to be in the world and what you're actually going to be doing, that might spice up your job and how you perceive your job. So it could be a really interesting way of approaching a career is how can you actually choose a career path that's going to mean that every single day is genuinely crazily different, whether you're going to be sat at a desk doing some recruiting for clients in Haiti or whether you're going to be sat in a restaurant in Afghanistan listening to mortar strikes. There's a lot of unpredictability with what he does, and actually whether it's whatever path you might be going down, that might mean you get a lot more interest and out of your days.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love that point, and being open to that, I think, is so important. And to conclude, the first takeaway was if you want a job to travel, this could be the one. And then second was actually you can find some jobs that are purely about your interest, and if you look hard enough, you can find them. And then the third one is just being open to flexibility, because it could be a sign of a really interesting job that is a bit different from the norm. And that is exactly what we're about, aren't we, Jamie? Enjoyed that a lot with James. It was a great listen, and hopefully it's probably put some people off that career, but I'm sure there's a few people listening who would love to get in touch. So happy to put James in touch with anyone who's keen to listen, and I'm sure you can find him all over LinkedIn as well if you want to have a chat with him. But yeah, thank you very much for your support. If you wouldn't mind just giving a little rating, whatever it is, 1 star, 5 stars, whatever you want on our pod, it really helps with the algorithm and pushing us up the search engines. So thank you very much for listening. A little rating would be unbelievable, and we will catch you next week.